Hello, this is Mark Smith, Director of Curriculum Instruction and Assessment from Monomoy Schools, and I just want to walk everybody through a little bit the UbD template so that we're all on the same page on what should be included in each of the sections if you are doing some curriculum work for the district. So first, the top section up here, the unit name that I think stands for itself. It's whatever the unit name for this particular unit is going to be. If the scope and sequence document's already been developed, you're just going to be able to copy that right from the scope and sequence document. Additionally, this next section here, the transfer goals. Transfer goals work has also already been done for you. So you're thinking about the transfer goals for your department that make the most amount of sense in the unit. This work should already be done on the scope and sequence document. If not, though, you can look, if you go to the Monomoy Regional School District page, go under curriculum and content areas, and then select whichever content area you're working in. So let's say for English, for example, we're going to select here the first, or this landing page is going to have your transfer goals. Each of them has the transfer goals on the landing page for that particular department. Over here in this section where it says established goals, this is really where you're going to be looking at the content standards which are going to be covered in your particular units, or in this particular unit. So you're going to want to identify which the standards are, put them out in their Word format so that we're writing out the standards. Sometimes people do look to sort of consolidate some of the standard language, which is perfectly fine, as long as you're not losing the essence of what's in the standard. Additionally, if your content area has practice standards, you're going to want to include those practice standards here as well. The standards, the coding for the standards and the coding for the practice standards, again, is going to be on your scope and sequence document. If we come back over here into the desired results section, stage 1, we're going to be looking here next at understandings. This is the same as the core concepts on the scope and sequence document. So these are the big ideas that you're going to be looking, that the students are going to hopefully walk away with from this particular unit. So for example, if I was doing a unit in science on matter and interactions, and I start to look into what's involved in those standards, something I might pull out are some big ideas that atoms are the building blocks of pure substances and that they make up all living things, and that new substances with new properties can be created when atoms are rearranged through chemical reactions. Those might be some of the big ideas that I want kids to walk away with. And there's going to be essential questions as well that we're going to want to go for our unit. And I'll do a separate thing on essential questions to dive into those a little bit more, but essential questions should be broad. It should be something that you can come back to multiple times throughout the unit. Should be something that kids can address multiple ways. So we might say for a unit like this, there might be a question like, what does change look like? Which would then ultimately allow kids to answer that in different ways, because we can get into conversations around chemical change versus physical change, changes in properties, etc. It would allow us to attack that question from multiple ways, and kids have to combine different bits of information. You don't want an essential question just to be something they can rotely repeat back to you with facts that they've learned. They need to use some higher order thinking skills in order to answer that question, in order to pull different bits of information back. The next section here, acquisition, where it says students will know and students will be skilled at, this is really drilling down a little bit. This is where you might actually pull your objectives from, like, so your students will be able to, your SWOBAT statements. So something very specific, if I carry through with that particular unit on matter and interactions, a specific thing I'm going to want kids to know is the difference between a physical change and a chemical change. So that would go here, listed on what kids will know. I might list specific vocabulary here, like thermal energy, mixtures, compounds, pure substances, etc. And then under here in the skill section, it's what specific skills are kids going to need in order to be successful within this unit. So it might be, in this particular case, I'm going to want them to be able to model substances. So they're going to need to be able to create a model diagram. I'm also perhaps going to need them to balance chemical equations. It's going to be a skill that they're going to need to be able to do, separate from the knowledge that they're going to get. So this is your first step. This is really, when we think about backwards designing, we want to think about all this before we get into the learning planning. Because if we don't know where it is that we want students to go, if we don't know what big ideas we want them to walk away with, if we don't know what the learning is that we want them ultimately to have, we can't make an effective plan. It's like an airplane pilot taking off without knowing where he or she is flying. And I don't think any of us would want to get on a plane that didn't have a destination. The next section is evidence, which talks about how are we going to know. So once we've identified where it is we want kids to go, the next thing we need to figure out is how are we going to know whether or not they got there. If I carry my plane analogy, we all want to have a common understanding of what a successful flight looks like, and a successful landing on the other end. I don't think we want to just sort of leave it up to everybody else to make their own decision on what that is. I think we want to have some common benchmarks, and that's where assessment comes in for a unit too. Here, what we're talking about is if more than one people are teaching this unit, what are the common assessments that we're going to use to show us that the kids have learned the things that are up here. So we can't get into assessments until we know what it is that we want kids to know and be able to do. And then there are two different, you might, over here where it says evaluation criteria, this is where you might put rubrics or other ways that you're going to use to identify and evaluate student learning. And over here is the actual assessment. So there might be performance tasks, there might be other type of assessments, there might be quizzes, there might be, there's a myriad of different ways for kids to actually show their learning. So there's a lot of flexibility in here. And not every unit has to have a performance task. And performance tasks, please don't get focused on the word performance. It doesn't have to be a play or a song or a dance. It just means that students are applying their knowledge in some unique way. And they're combining different bits of information that they learned throughout the course of the year. It's not simply just repeating back rote information that they've been given. And there is a place for that in assessment, but that's not a performance task. And then finally, once you've determined this, where is it that we want students to go? How will we know if they're going to get there? Then it's time to develop the plan for how we're going to get kids there. As teachers, what are the steps we're going to take over the course of how many ever days you've set aside for this unit to get kids there? So this is where you start to list out the first lesson, the second lesson. It doesn't have to get all the way to the lesson lesson plan level. That's a little more detailed than we need for unit planning, but it's going to be that this is the idea we're going to do first, then we're going to do this idea. If there are resources that have been developed, you can hot link them right on here. If there are videos, etc. All this is where you can really start to put all the resources together to help someone else and yourself get organized around teaching that particular unit. As always, if you have any questions about unit design, please reach out to me early and often. My email address is msmith@monomoy.edu. Thank you.